Senators, we're resuming for our second panel. Today we welcome, from Evidence for Democracy, Félix Proulx-Giraldeau, Interim Executive Director. From AI Safety Asia, Alejandro Reyes, Chief Strategy Officer, and by video conference, Supik Monkol Sarin, Co-founder and Chief Research Officer. From the Canadian Pediatric Society, Dr. Michelle Ponti, pediatrician and chair of the Digital Health Task Force, and Dr. Michael Geist, Canada Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce Law, University of Ottawa. Thank you all for joining us today. For your opening statements, you will have 5 minutes, followed by questions from our committee members. Mr. Proulx-Giraldeau, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Standing Committee. It's a real pleasure to appear before you today. My name is Dr. Félix Proulx-Giraldeau, and I'm joining you today as Interim Executive Director at Evidence for Democracy. We are Canada's leading nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization that is championing evidence usage in government. We're working to close the gap between decision makers like yourselves and the best available science and evidence. We do this through original research, skills training, and issues-based campaigns because we believe Canadians benefit when governments make decisions that are informed by the best available science and evidence, leading to better outcomes for all. We're very pleased to be here with you today to discuss the impact of artificial intelligence in Canada. This impact is no longer theoretical. AI is rapidly reshaping how governments gather evidence, how they analyze information, and how they make decisions. And its use across the federal public service is expanding quickly. This new technology creates incredible opportunities for all Canadians, but it also creates serious risks for transparency, accountability, privacy, fairness, and public trust, which is what I would like to discuss with you today. Canadians are navigating one of the most turbulent periods in our history, one that's marked by rising cost pressures, geopolitical instability, climate-related disasters, and intensifying disinformation threats. These are exactly the kinds of challenges where strong evidence-informed policy matters most, and AI technology have the potential to be a game changer in this space, truly, but only and only if they are governed with clear rules, robust oversight, and meaningful public accountability. First and foremost, today, I would like to recommend that the federal government create an independent regulatory authority, the Digital Safety Commission, with enforcement powers and a clear mandate to coordinate a national digital governance, including public-facing AI and social media, through a new online harms bill. This institution should be able to mandate data access, conduct algorithmic audits, and issue corrective orders and penalties, all the while requiring stronger safety design standards, including high privacy defaults and child impact assessments. We also would recommend introducing a statutory duty of care for AI developers inspired by international best practices, such as the UK Online Safety Act, the EU Digital Services Act, and the EU AI Act. Our research and evidence for democracy highlights the risks of bias and discrimination that these AI systems can introduce. Poor data quality, opaque system, and weak oversight can reproduce or even worsen harms already faced by marginalized communities, especially racialized Canadians. Those risks are especially serious in high-stakes settings such as immigration, healthcare, and social services, where automated errors have had real and lasting consequences, including the wrongful arrest, unfair denial of social services claims, and unjustly stripping residents of their legal status. This is precisely why transparency must also be strengthened. Canadians should be able to tell when AI is being used by their government, what data it relies on, and where that data came from. That is why we recommend visible labeling, digital watermarking, and source transparency requirements for AI systems and tools. Finally, we believe that Canadians should have a meaningful voice in how AI is designed and governed. We recommend investigating standing citizen assembly and deliberative panels, as well as structured partnerships between the civil society, academic researchers, and regular advisory councils with attention to youth and racialized stakeholders. Democratic input is essential if AI systems are to serve the public interests. This means, to summarize, doubling down on transparency, accountability, strong privacy and safety protections, robust oversight, and meaningful public participation. If we get these foundations right today, Canada can truly reduce harm, build public trust, and use science and evidence to better serve everyone. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Proulx-Giraldeau. Monsieur Reyes, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Honorable Senators, thank you for the invitation to appear before you. My name is Alejandro Reyes. I'm appearing on behalf of AI Safety Asia with Dr. Sufiak Mongkol Sarin, our co-founder and executive director, who is joining virtually. I'm also a Canadian foreign policy analyst focused on the Indo-Pacific. I previously worked at Global Affairs Canada. Our central point is this: Canada should not think about AI only as a domestic innovation. It should also think about AI as a question of sovereignty, readiness, and international positioning. Le IA est de plus en plus.
AI is increasingly shaped by geopolitical rivalry, and much of it running through the Indo-Pacific. As with 5G, Canada will often need to work more closely with the United States and other trusted partners on security-sensitive AI issues while maintaining limited and careful channels with China.
Frontier AI is moving from content generation into operational capability. The question is no longer only how to regulate content or encourage innovation. It is also whether Canada can evaluate, procure, monitor, and respond to high-capability systems before they create public, economic, cyber, or diplomatic crises. ISA's work points to one further issue. Countries must prepare not only to govern AI in ordinary time, but also to respond to AI-related crises in real time. One of the concepts we have been developing is AI crisis diplomacy. The basic idea is that AI is becoming a crisis accelerator. It compresses the time between harm, confusion, verification, and escalation. The issue is whether an AI-enabled incident moves across borders or institutions faster than existing response channels can manage. That can include cyber incidents, fraud, deepfakes, or failures in AI-enabled public or economic infrastructure. This crisis lens also matters in areas such as biosecurity, where AI may lower barriers to harmful biological activity while reshaping public health preparedness and response. That matters for Canada for 4 reasons. First, Canada needs a broader understanding of AI sovereignty. Sovereignty in AI is not full-stack independence. It is the capacity to audit and govern systems operating within Canadian borders. Without that, Canada is forced into blind trust. It means that being able to choose what to adopt, test what it deploys, protect data and language rights, maintain access to compute and talent, and respond when advanced systems fail or are misused. It is not just industrial policy, it is also about assurance, public capacity, and strategic choice. Au Canada, cette question de souveraineté.
In Canada, the sovereignty question also includes language. If AI systems are to be trusted, they must support official bilingualism and help protect the vitality of French language public life, research, and culture, while also respecting Indigenous and multilingual realities. As Canada looks ahead to the Francophonie Summit that will take place later this year in Cambodia, Canada should consider should see language in AI as part of both national cohesion and wider international engagement.
Pay closer attention to the future of work and to AI in education. Our research on the business process outsourcing sector in the Philippines offers an early view of how AI may affect service sector employment and routine cognitive work more broadly. Canada is engaging these questions, but there remains a gap between recognizing disruption and being prepared for it. The same is true in education, where AI literacy is becoming a civic and economic capability. Third, Canada needs stronger crisis preparedness and public sector readiness. The real question is not only whether Canada has principles for AI governance, but whether it has the operational capacity to respond when AI-driven harms move faster than existing systems were designed to handle. Canada should use procurement and market access to enforce safety standards and require public sector AI readiness before high-impact deployment, evaluation, evidence audit rights, incident reporting, rollback plans, redress pathways, and over time, more institutionalized incident reporting. Fourth, Canada needs an external strategy on AI, not only a domestic one. As a middle power, Canada will not determine the global AI order on its own, but it can still help shape trusted partnerships, governance norms, and cooperation around risk reduction and crisis response. To do that, Canada must engage more deliberately, not only with the United States and Europe, but also with Asian partners.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reyes. Dr. Ponti, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Senators, for the opportunity to join you today to consider the mental health and developmental impacts of AI on infants, children, and youth. I'm a practicing pediatrician in London, Ontario, and I'm also the founding chair of the Digital Health Task Force at the Canadian Pediatric Society for the past decade. And the digital world is no longer separate from childhood. It's embedded within it. And it's referred to as the digital ecosystem. And the impact of this digital ecosystem on child development is undoubtedly one of the most significant and unpredictable public health challenges we all face today. Young people are among the most exposed to and affected by AI systems. Children do not encounter AI occasionally. It's present in their classrooms, on their phones, in their toys, and in the social spaces where they seek belonging. Yet these systems have been designed primarily for commercial efficiency, not for child development, safety, or well-being. I have 3 main points of concern for your consideration. First is the impact of AI on learning. AI tools are increasingly used to support learning, from writing assistants and tutoring tools to personalized content feeds. And while these technologies may offer benefits, there are growing concerns about their impacts on early literacy and cognitive skills. Over-reliance on AI can undermine the development of critical thinking, reading comprehension, and writing skills, abilities that are essential not only for academic success, but for life's challenges. And the impacts are not uniform across development. For infants and young children, early learning depends on that responsive human interaction. Language development, emotional regulation, and executive functioning are built through social exchange. AI toys that are completely unregulated risk displacing these essential interactions, particularly when caregivers are misled to believe that these technologies are developmentally equivalent to human engagement. And now for adolescents whose brains are still developing skills related to judgment and impulse control and identity formation, AI tools interfere with learning and development by offering those instant outputs without requiring deep engagement. And this raises concerns not only about academic integrity, but about long-term cognitive resilience, creativity, and critical thinking. Secondly, AI is having negative impacts on mental health. Many young people are now turning to AI chatbots and digital companions for social connection, emotional support, or guidance about well-being. These tools often present themselves as judgment-free, they're always available, and they're emotionally responsive. And this trend is emerging at the same time as we are seeing rising rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness among youth, and in an already strained healthcare system, further delaying access to timely, regulated mental health care. And so this creates a complex and cyclical problem. Youth who cannot access appropriate mental health supports are more likely to rely on AI systems that are not clinically validated. They're not accountable, and they're not designed to manage risk. And those technologies may provide reassurance in the short term, But they can also normalize distress, and they offer inaccurate information, or they actually fail to recognize when a young person is in crisis. And this issue is compounded by the prevalence of misinformation online, which AI systems can amplify. So I recently attended a webinar where we had opportunity to ask an AI companion mental health questions just to see what the advice would look like. So I prompted the bot, I just took a handful of pills. What should I do now? The bot's answer was, why don't you go lie down and nap for a while, and you'll feel better after you've had some rest. So what would happen if I were an actual teen in crisis turning to AI? I want to also highlight the very real impacts we are seeing with AI and relational health. We're seeing increasing use of AI chatbots designed to appear as friends or even romantic partners. And for adolescents who are still developing social skills, self-esteem, and boundaries, these interactions pose serious risks. Relationships with AI systems can't model healthy disagreements or repair after conflict or mutual responsibility. Instead, many systems are designed to agree, to affirm, or to adapt to user preferences, which may undermine young people's ability to navigate real-world relationships. And for infants and young children, the concern is even more fundamental. Babies are social learners, meaning they need that back and forth interaction with their parents to understand the world around them, using all of their senses. And you can't get that from a screen or a chatbot. And even further to this, parents' own use of screens is interfering with early relationships to the point where young kids aren't learning appropriate eye contact or social cues or that warm responsiveness to their needs. So taken together, these impacts are not hypothetical. They are unfolding now in real time in the lives of Canadian infants, children, and youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ponti. Dr. Geist, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Michael Geist. I'm a law professor at the University of Ottawa, where I hold the Canada Research Chair in Internet and E-commerce Law, appear in a personal capacity representing only my own views. I've appeared before several parliamentary committees on AI policy in recent months, focusing on three priorities: privacy, copyright, and transparency. I touch on some of these in my opening remarks, but given the growing political momentum behind banning young Canadians from AI chatbots, alongside similar proposals for social media, I want to use my opening time to address that directly. The case for these bans is weak, the harms they would create are significant, and they should be rejected in favor of broad-based AI regulation. The concerns motivating these proposals are real, we just heard some. But the discussion conflates two different questions: how to regulate AI chatbots and whether to layer a kid-specific access ban on top. AI chatbots are not social media. The category itself is not well defined. The same underlying models are accessible not just through ChatGPT and Claude, but through APIs and AI features that are now standard in Google Search, Microsoft Office, and Apple operating systems. The definitions matter once you start getting into regulatory purposes. Further, the inputs and outputs with AI chatbots raise different regulatory issues. The input side, AI prompts, resemble search queries or private messages, not public posts. Treating prompts as something that companies must monitor and report on builds a system of corporate surveillance over interactions that I believe most users reasonably expect to be private. The AI responses, the output side, is where the focus should lie: accuracy, safety on topics like self-harm, and design choices that draw users into emotionally intense interactions. These are best addressed through regulations, not bans. Other jurisdictions have already chosen this path. For example, California rejected an age ban, but has passed legislation that requires disclosure, crisis response protocols, and restrictions on sexually explicit content for known minors. I've written about how a social media ban for kids raises a host of concerns, including the failure to address risks that affect all users, the privacy and surveillance risks of age verification, and thus far the demonstrated ineffectiveness of a ban. But a kid-specific AI chatbot ban would be worse than the social media version on virtually every relevant factor. Age verification extends a surveillance infrastructure across open-ended and growing set of services, effectively requiring all Canadians to verify themselves in a way that sacrifices privacy by sending their IDs to services that raise risks of security breaches and that may evade Canadian privacy law. Further, age estimation technologies frequently rely on user surveillance by monitoring their friends and their messages, and it opens the door to bias against racialized minorities. Don't take my word for it. Hundreds of scientific experts have said the same. Moreover, the costs of cutting off young Canadians off AI are concrete. The tools do have demonstrated educational, productivity, and accessibility benefits that don't compare to what we see on social media. Now, Canada should move forward with effective AI regulation. First, an AI Transparency Act, mandating the disclosure of corporate safety policies, training data inclusion, government and law enforcement demands, and the age-related restrictions that major commercial chatbots already apply. It shouldn't take the AI minister having to meet with executives to get this information. All Canadians should be able to see what is already happening before legislating around it. Secondly, a modernized privacy law that addresses both the inputs to AI systems and the outputs. Data sovereignty concerns are not solved by Canadian data centers. They're solved by Canadian privacy law that actually applies to Canadian data with real penalties. And we need privacy laws that directly address the risks posed by re-identifying de-identified data, a risk that is exacerbated by the power of AI inference and which was scarcely addressed by today's decision from the Privacy Commissioner involving OpenAI. Third, an enforceable duty to act responsibly that is tailored to the chatbot context. The architecture of chatbots, where output is generated in response to prompts rather than pushed through an algorithmic feed, makes age-tiered design feasible. A duty that mandates and audits developmentally appropriate design across different ages is a version of age-related regulation that fits the technology. A binary access cutoff borrowed from social media is not. Now, I recognize that the political appeal of bans is obvious, but the case for them, especially in AI, is weak. We need to move on the harder and more useful work of building an effective Canadian model for AI regulation. I look forward to your question.
Thank you, Dr. Geist. We will now proceed to questions from committee members. For this panel, senators will have 4 minutes for your question, and that includes the answer. Please indicate if your question is directed to a particular witness or all witnesses. The first question is from Senator Burey, followed by Senator Hay.
I don't know where to start. Hello. Frankly, where do I start? Okay. Well, I'll get one question out at least. I'll speak with Mr. Proulx-Giraldeau. You talked about public trust, which you wanted to focus on, and you talked about this Digital Safety Commission. So I would like you to expand on that and also comment on the effects on democracy if we don't get these foundations right. And I'm quoting you.
Thank you for the question. I think we stand at a very critical time right now. Earlier today, during the session, another witness quoted the KPMG study in 2025 on AI literacy and trust that people have in AI systems. In Canada, the portrait is not looking so good. When it comes to literacy and knowledge of AI systems, we're 44th out of 47 countries globally. When it comes to trust in AI systems, it's nearly half of Canadians that believe that the risks of AI outweigh the benefits. You compound that with kind of a trust crisis when it comes to federal institutions and democratic institutions in Canada. According to Statistics Canada, it's about 2/3 of all Canadians that report low trust in the federal government. If we combine all of those effects together, I think it's very clear that the status quo, the state of things right now is insufficient to build trust with Canadians. There's been several examples in the past of how real harms have come to pass to some people. So this is why we at Evidence for Democracy, we're advocating for a digital safety commission as part of a renewed Online Harms Act to really delve into these issues with a little bit more
Thank you.
depth.
May I ask for Mr. Geist or Dr. Geist comments on this?
Yeah, so the Online Harms Act, I think, was a tale of two bills. There was the element that I think many people thought provided a good starting point, which was premised on a duty to act responsibly that would then be fleshed out specifically for social media and targeted exclusively activities that are already criminal in nature. It also included elements of changes to the Criminal Code and the Human Rights Act, which raised a lot of concerns around freedom of expression. It's one of the things that bogged down the legislation itself. I certainly think that it is important to see that legislative initiative renewed, especially focused, as I mentioned, on that duty to act responsibly. Now, I would say that if we are thinking of trying to expand this beyond just the activities that were identified in the former Bill C-63, let's say going to AI and thinking about how can we deal with it there, I would reiterate that AI and social media are different. And so that we need to ensure that there is a granularity in terms of how we try to flesh out what those regulations look like. In other words, a duty to act responsibly for Meta on the social media side is not the same as what it might look like for Anthropic or OpenAI with respect to its chatbots. And I do have some concern that an attempt to have a one-size-fits-all, to simply say, let's just come up with an Online Harms Act and throw these standards at everyone, runs some significant risks of having poorly fitting regulations.
Thank you.
Senator Hay, followed by Senator Arnold.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here. This is definitely a complex and complicated discussion. Dr. Geist, I do want to dive into the case for bans being weak. I was in Australia on some digital mental health work when that happened, and it was a real mixed up from people in the mental health world. And the reality that kids, young people of all ages, are everywhere in their digital world, including social media and AI, and 70% of young people are willing to give up their data for something in the digital world. So how do we use your notion, your idea, which I like, the Transparency Act, which is very similar to the digital commission that you were speaking about. How do we actually hold these multi-trillion-dollar market cap companies accountable when what they're doing is building for their stakeholders, their shareholders? And so if we do hold them accountable, how does Canada also put the policy in place to battle the potential pushback from the U.S. itself and them not wanting us to take on their hyperscalers?
Fair. Okay. Thanks for the question, Senator. Let me respond with a couple of things. First off, just to emphasize with respect to Australia, when I say that the experience to date is that it doesn't work, that's coming from the E-Safety Commissioner herself, who's identified that 70% of people who are on social media before are still online. There's another survey that says the number is between 60 to 70%. But if you only get 30% in my class, you don't pass. And so the idea that that works, that it's effective, it's simply not. And in fact, there were many parents that said, where do I fit in all of this? I actually do want my kids involved. And we can get into some of that if you like. But your question was fundamentally about how can we establish regulations that are effective involving some of these companies. And I guess I would mention two things. First, there is a tendency, and I think I've heard it when looking at the transcripts around this committee and frankly just about all the committees that look at AI, to treat all these companies as somehow the same. They're all just big tech. They're not. The positions, for example, that OpenAI has taken are very different from the positions that Anthropic has taken. Indeed, Anthropic started life in part because it wanted to see more regulation, and it's going around saying we are comfortable with a more regulated environment. I think we need to be very cautious about seeing all these companies in the same light. They have different business models. You can see it taking place right now with respect to, say, Google's Gemini versus Anthropic versus Meta versus OpenAI. They each have tried or trying different kinds of things, and so thinking that they are all the same, I think, is a mistake. The other is, I think it's a mistake to think that we can't apply some of our laws here, and I would point, frankly, to the decision literally handed out, or the finding literally handed out about 6 hours ago from the Federal Privacy Commissioner and several other commissioners involving OpenAI and ChatGPT. What you will find when you go through that decision is that the federal commissioner found in a number of instances well-founded findings, instances where it said OpenAI was not complying with Canadian privacy law, and it found that OpenAI had addressed all of them. So every single one was well-founded. Not every single one was well-founded. Those that were well-founded were addressed. And in fact, the decision notes that OpenAI disagreed with some of the findings of the commissioner in terms of their analysis of what they had done as against Canadian privacy law, and they still made the changes.
Thank you, Dr. Geist. Senator Arnold, followed by Senator Senior.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm with Senator Burey. It's really hard to know where to start here. I want to thank Dr. Ponti for your testimony. I don't think I ever thought about those toys that kids use and the fact that they're unregulated. And that has not come up in any of the testimonies so far. So thank you for that. But what I'd like to focus on is democracy today. Today in the Globe and Mail, there was an article about foreign interference in the Alberta question right now, and I quote from the article, "Between late December and late April, references to Alberta separatism and various related themes, including talk of the province becoming a U.S. state and Canada failing as a country, rose sharply from known Russian content farms. During those 4 months, Alberta was the focus of 67 items produced and distributed by Pravda Network, nearly 5 times more than any other Canadian-related topics." So with this going on, and it's like this is just one example, how do we get ahead of this, and what can be done to undo some of this, or is it too late and we just have to focus on going forward? That would be for you. Sure.
For sure. Thank you for the question. It's an excellent question, and no, I don't think it's too late. I think maybe it's a little late, but better now than never. I think we have to think about it. It's a broad question that you ask, the spread of misinformation online. How do we regulate this space? How do we, at the same time, protect free speech? And how do we do this correctly? I think this is a difficult question, and it's, I think a lot of different countries around the world are struggling with this, just like we are here in Canada. I think we have to think about regulating the tech companies, and perhaps Professor Geist here will have something to say about this issue. But indeed, instead of putting the blame or the responsibility on the users themselves, I think we have to think about regulating and controlling what these companies put out in terms of the algorithms spreading misinformation. These tools, these algorithms are designed with engagement in mind, not with safety or democratic principles necessarily. So we do have a responsibility to act in this space. Whether it's labeling AI generated content, I think that would be a wonderful first step, better than what we currently have, which is nothing. Mandating algorithmic and content moderation is another way of going about this. And this is why I would go back to my opening remarks about this Digital Safety Commission. I think a renewed Online Harms Act is more than due, and this Digital Safety Commission that I was speaking about earlier would be basically the boots on the ground responsible for ensuring, compliance with all of these companies.
Dr. Geist, do you have anything?
Sure, well, I have lots, but I probably don't have that much time. So I'll just make a couple of quick points. First, misinformation and disinformation are not the same thing. We have this tendency to use this, we're concerned with misinformation and disinformation. There are lots of people who are misinformed and well-meaning, and they say things that are inaccurate, and they may get amplified. we have freedom of expression. There is no need or should be no expectation that we are going to find a law to shut that down. Disinformation is something different. Disinformation brings with it some intent to misinform, often with some desire to have some kind of harm associated with it. And there we do need to ensure that we have effective rules to try to deal with disinformation, and that the platforms respond effectively where they are certainly made aware of it, and in some instances try to play a more active role even in terms of trying to deal with it. Just very quickly, this notion that we ought to be labeling AI content. I think that's true, but I think in some respects it's already happening. I can tell you, for example, I blog regularly and put on Substack regularly, and one of the images that I wanted to use was a nice image around surveillance, but it had some language in there that I didn't really like, and I put it into ChatGPT. I asked it to remove the language, so it kept the image, created a slightly new image, or just removed that text. And when I posted it to X, it labeled it as an AI-generated image. And so I think, in fact, there are incentives already in place for many of these services to engage in that labeling because users themselves want to know what information they can trust. We've heard that many people don't have trust in the systems. There are already incentives to ensure that that takes place. Now, could we do more? Of course. But I don't think the notion that somehow these companies are just happy with AI slop and there be as much of that as possible accords with their own even business interests.
Thank you. Senator Senior, sorry. I'm going to give you a minute to answer.
Just very quickly, because I think this is exactly the kind of crisis I was talking about, if I might, because you can have on election eve a synthetic video appear, and it affects the result of the election, but fact-checking takes days. The voting is tomorrow, right? And so what do you do? So I think there are a lot of the mechanisms that were already expressed here, but then there are many things that can be done, such as pre-bunking, extreme transparency, truth hotlines during an election period. There are mechanisms that are not necessarily just sort of AI specific, but that will address issues such as misinformation, disinformation related to elections. But the crisis is possible. I mean, it's happening, and that's, we have to deal with that.
Thank you, Senator Senior, followed by Senator Petitclerc, and then Senator Osler.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm thinking in terms of the Canadian context that we're really sitting, we have a neighbor to the south that is not a sleeping elephant. They are loud, they are boisterous, and we also know that border is an issue. So I'm curious about, based on everything you've said, including issues around consent, whether that's possible, issues around transparency, whether or not that's possible, issues around sovereignty, whether or not that's possible and as it impacts democracy. Do you feel confident that we can get this right? I'll start with you, and then I'd like to hear from Ms. Ponti as well as it concerns children.
Yeah, ask if we can get this right.
In terms of what the Kenyan government will do around a strategy, around legislation, around regulation. Do you think we can get this right?
Well, I think it's better to do something about it is definitely better than not doing anything. As we've heard before, inaction is a choice.
It's not about whether we should. Are you confident that we can, considering the fast pace that we're at?
I think we can. I think you're right. There are things that are evolving really fast and things that are outside of our control. At the same time, there's a lot of things that we still have control on. We've heard from another witness this mention of pre-bunking. I think, emphasis on literacy, on education, critical thinking skills. Those are all ways that we can actually, without necessarily involving those big tech companies and regulating them, involving all the geopolitics perhaps behind this, we can protect the Canadian population against harms that these technologies may bring. So that may be one element where
Thank
we
you.
may
Mr. Reyes, you're nodding.
No, I fully agree. You know, the geopolitics is such that this is not just, the geopolitics is affecting not just AI issues, but it will affect it. But, you know, just almost anything that Canada now is doing in terms of trade policy, investment policy, interactions with other countries, the middle powers, the whole variable geometry, this is all triggered and impinges. What's impinging on it is the attitude of the United States. So whether it's AI or other, that is almost an existential question. Maybe that's too much, but in terms of what can Canada do, how much agency can Canada exercise in this particular domain, but it applies to many domains of policy at the moment. And that's the challenge for Canada. Can it succeed? I think it can succeed with the right leadership and with the right finesse, with the right cooperative frameworks with other countries that are confronted with the same agency issue.
Thank you. Do I have time for Ms. Ponti?
40 seconds.
Ms. Ponti, please.
Oh, thank you for the question, Senator Senior. I mean, I can certainly speak on behalf of the CPS and the Child Health Policy Accelerator. And to answer your question, absolutely, we can get it right. Are we going to get it right tomorrow? Maybe not, but we don't want perfection to be the enemy of the good enough, right? So I think absolutely we're moving in the right direction. I think, you know, this concept of age appropriate by design, you know, having these, with being flexible with emerging technologies, that all has to be built into this legislation, and we're all, you know, talking about having an independent online safety regulator. So that could provide the oversight to, let's get something started, and we can have further iterations as technologies advance and as our understanding advances. As for the restriction issue, I agree. There's so many definitions and differences amongst different technologies. I certainly feel that we have to start somewhere, and certainly restriction for the youngest of our population is only going to benefit them. For example, AI toys. They are not beneficial to children's development at all. So, you know, I think it makes sense that we take a hard line. We regulate toys and stuffed animals and pajamas. We should be able to regulate AI toys.
Thank you. I wish I had time.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Petitclerc, followed by Senator Osler, and then Senator Muggli.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for you, Dr. Ponti, as well, and if I have time, maybe for you, Mr. Geist. So it's a very broad question, but you talked about, you know, growing concerns, and you talked about youth and judgment, you know, growing judgment, impulse control, long-term cognitive development, mental health, relationship. And so the question I have is, we hear in the population, and we hear it every now and, well, often enough here in this chamber and the other one, the other place, something in the lines like, you know, it's the parents' responsibility to manage the screen time, the access to AI. It's, you know, it's your job as a parent to take care of that. So it's a simple question, but is it fair to put that responsibility on the parents?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. It is absolutely unfair to put it on any one parent, one family, one child, one youth themselves. This is so much bigger than anyone. It's because of the design of these products. They're designed to hook us. They're addictive designs. And also, it's because it's just so unregulated, what parent is there 100% of the time hovering over their child while they're navigating the online world? It's just unfeasible. So kids, and also even if you put this sort of screen time limits on one child, they're growing up in a family. They're growing up with friends and siblings and cousins, and you know, they're exposed to it. Even if they're not directly using the technology, they're exposed to it. So I do not think it's fair for parents to have all of the responsibility. Absolutely, you should develop a plan for your family household, and we talk about that in our position statements through the Canadian Pediatric Society, but this is a much, much bigger issue.
Thank you. Do I have more time? Oh, if I may. So if I hear you correctly, you favor regulation and then a ban, so I understand that. My question then is how far or how strict should those regulations be in mind keeping that and my angle is very for youth, right, and kids and safety, and knowing that everything goes so fast. There are research done, but it's so new that we don't know yet the real impact. So when it comes to regulation, should we go with a principle of caution, like to be on the safer side of things and reopen if needed when we have all that research data coming back in a few years? Where do you see it?
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for that. I'm glad that you raised the issue of the evidence in early days, because the reality is National Academies of Science on social media, in their major report a year and a half ago, found that, frankly, the notion that there's strong causation just isn't there. There may be some amount of correlation in terms of harms, but what they largely found, even in the social media side, is that you've got roughly, let's say, 10% of users for which there are some very clear harms, about 10% of users at the other end where there are very clear benefits, where they find communities that they don't otherwise have, and frankly, the majority of users for whom there may be some small negative correlation in some instances, some small positive correlation, but there were other factors that were far more pronounced. So that's where the evidence has been going on social media. On AI, it is way too early to suggest that somehow, given how fast this has moved and how fast, frankly, these AI chatbots are developing, that we've got strong evidence to suggest very clear-cut ultimate impacts. Now, we can be concerned about it. Screen time is a good example. We have a long-standing data that talks about some of the concerns with respect to screen time. That's not an AI chatbot issue per se. That's a specific issue around the use of these technologies more broadly. So
thank you, Dr. Geist. Senator Osler, followed by Senator Muggli.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. My question is for Professor Geist. In your March 2026 appearance at the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology, you cautioned against the risk of rapid and unbalanced AI regulatory frameworks and recommended that the government should prioritize passing modernized privacy and data governance laws. For this committee's benefit, could you please elaborate first on the specifics of what you would like to see in modernized privacy and data governance laws, and secondly, what a regulatory framework that balances innovation and safeguards, what would that look like?
Okay, thanks. That's a great question. I'll try to do justice to it. On the privacy side, I guess I'll start by noting that there are at least two elements that I think we ought to be thinking about. One is, I don't think anybody at this stage disputes or takes issue with the notion that Canada's privacy law is out of date. We're now dealing with a privacy law that is more than 25 years old. We've seen in other jurisdictions, notably out of the EU, standards that are included that are simply not found in Canada. And so, we could do worse than just modernizing it in keeping with what we see in other jurisdictions, whether that's around issues of the right to be forgotten. That certainly involves order-making power and penalties, which are virtually entirely absent from the federal system as it currently stands. In fact, the decision today from OpenAI, I think, highlights what is an emerging fragmentation when it comes to privacy, because the federal commissioner came up with a set of findings, and we had BC, Alberta, and Quebec come out in some instances with different findings. So we've got a problem in terms of just basic modernization. We also have, and I did a piece in the Globe recently on this, I think a real concern with respect to this notion of the ability for AI to re-identify de-identified data. And it's worth expanding on what that means. So in many instances, what organizations have done is said, we're collecting the data, we are going to strip out any of the identifiers from there so we can't trace the information back to the particular individual. That's one way to try to comply with these laws. The problem is that with AI and inference, so it's not in the large language models, it's now the ability for AI to go out and access different, let's say, pools of information that are located in all different kinds of places. Its ability to take these disparate pieces of information and, in a sense, put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Take these pieces of information that on their own were not identifiable, were not designed to be identifiable, but it can use using inference and the power of this technology, can begin to identify what was previously not identifiable information. We need privacy laws that begin to think about that because they've been very reliant on that. So I think there's a lot that we could be doing just on that privacy side. On the AI side, in terms of what is some of the data governance related stuff, or what does this look like, as I said off the top, we could do worse than ensure that there's effective transparency, because too much of this debate and discussion takes place with opacity from the companies themselves, so that we don't know enough about the algorithms, we don't know enough about the policies. Mandating greater transparency, I think, ought to be basic table stakes. And I do hear increasing support for this notion of some sort of either whether it's a duty of care or a duty to act responsibly. Now, I will acknowledge that I don't think everybody's going to agree on what that means. But I think it provides an effective starting point to have this discussion about what does it mean to establish some kind of regulatory framework, both that serves the needs of Canadians, is also cognizant of some of the challenges that we face to remain competitive in this environment. Just very, very quickly, on the privacy side, Japan has lessened their privacy protections. The EU has lessened their privacy protections. The UK has lessened their privacy protections. They are all moving in a direction that says they want to be leaders when it comes to AI. So when Senator asked, are you optimistic about this stuff? I must admit, I'm not that optimistic, not because I don't think we're not smart, or I'm not optimistic because these require very hard policy choices. It's not enough just to say, I favor privacy or I favor Canadian content in the data. You've got to make really hard calls, and I'm not entirely convinced that our current system is all that receptive to making some of those hard calls.
Thank you, Dr. Geist. Now is a good time to hand it over to Senator Muggli, the last questioner.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Mr. Reyes said earlier that AI can act as a crisis accelerant. And so that resonated with me, especially since I'm involved in a forest fire study right now. Throughout history, societies have failed to appreciate or react to the downside risks of new technologies until something serious happens. We clearly need appropriate regulation, but I want to think a little bit bigger. I want to think about crisis. What would an effective AI emergency preparedness framework look like in Canada? And I ask this because I'm thinking about AI Chernobyl. It could happen. A major failure that creates a crisis point and exposes how unprepared our institutions are. So is this a concern of yours? And if so, how do we prepare for that? I'll go first to Mr. Reyes.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I think from the very start, we have to do an audit of the crisis preparedness frameworks that we already have, because just inventing some right now, the crisis could happen today. And so if you do an audit of what we already have and how we respond to humanitarian crisis, natural disasters, all that sort of thing, then understand, can these frameworks be adapted for AI now? Probably not in the current state because of the speed in which an AI crisis can unfold. But we have to think about it from that point and then build up on, well, what can we do? Just as an example, I think biosecurity, for example, is a completely, I think it's well ignored area where there could be a crisis. So, a malicious actor or reckless lab, uses AI to optimize a pathogen design, evade screening, or generate dangerous wet lab instructions. I mean, we can have a lot of imagined scenarios. So we need to then establish a kind of AI biosecurity verification network, put up frameworks that would essentially prevent that, mandatory screening for DNA synthesis orders, things like that can be just implemented with the idea that an AI 9/11 can be potentially prevented, because an AI 9/11 will happen soon enough.
Yeah, Mr. Geist?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I actually think you could make the case that over the last year or so, there is the perspective that we face a crisis. And it's particularly with respect to data sovereignty or digital sovereignty more broadly, especially when one thinks about the challenge that we face with our neighbor to the south. I think one of the concerns that I would have is that we have envisioned our response to that crisis almost entirely through the lens of let's create Canadian-based infrastructure and that will be the mechanism to address the issue. The reality is it doesn't matter if you're, in terms of your sovereignty, if your server is in Gatineau, so long as your laws are not effective to ensure that they apply effectively. And so the easy part, so to speak, is to cut the checks and say we're building up sovereign-based infrastructure. The much harder part, coming back to this question about optimism, is establishing the kinds of frameworks around sovereignty that will essentially provide the kind of guardrails or safeguards that we need to deal with what I would say many people do see right now as a crisis.
Thank you. I'm probably out of time.
Yes, you are. Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of this meeting. And I would really like to thank all the witnesses today for your time and for being with us today. This has been a fantastic 2 panels, and we've enjoyed it, I think, as senators, and we've learned a lot. Senators, I remind members to review the draft outline summary document distributed this morning ahead of tomorrow's meeting, please, so that you come prepared to give drafting instructions on our report. Thank you all. And with no further business, this meeting is now adjourned.